they say I got no limits. I'm walking in with a bottle of water, but that little bitch got Patron in it. All of you hoes spitting, none of you put any soul in it. If I hear you say it's all at the dome, and I'm probably leaving a hole in it. Yeah.
Hey guys, and welcome back to From a Fan's Eye View. Today we're starting this new series in which we're going to rank the NBA teams from worst to first. Now, in order to simplify things for ourselves, we decided to split this up into the two conferences, that being the Western and the Eastern Conference. And we decided that each conference is going to get its own little mini-series. Each mini-series will have 3 episodes, in which the first episode will include the bottom 5 teams, the second episode will have the 4 play-in teams, and the final episode will have the 6 playoff teams. Now, if you happen to like this video or other content, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and the subscribe button, as it helps us out a ton. But for now, just sit back, relax, grab some snacks, and hey, if you're old enough, if it's late enough, why not pour yourself a little something if you know what I mean. The Western Conference is an absolute crazy war zone of teams fighting for their spot to get into the NBA playoffs. You have the reigning champs looking to reclaim their spot at the top of the league, but they won't have it easy, as other teams are looking to prove themselves as true contenders this year. But unfortunately, only so many teams can make the playoffs, which leaves the remaining 5 teams just trying to flash glimpses of what they hope to be in the future. Starting at the bottom of our list, we have one of those such teams.
Well, guys, to start off our list, we have the Houston Rockets in the 15th spot at the bottom of the Western Conference. Now, the Rockets have some great bright side going into the next season, and it all starts with Jalen Green. Green was definitely the best player on the Rockets last season, but there's a lot to take in when it comes to Jalen Green. Without a doubt, Green can become an elite scorer in the NBA. He averaged about 5 more points per game this year than he did in his rookie campaign, going from 17.3 to 22.1 points per game. You could tell that he wanted to get to the rim more, and his free throws show that. The last season, he attempted 463 free throws, which is exactly 200 more than his rookie year. There are cases where he may not take the best shot in the right moment, maybe a low IQ shot, errant shot chucking in general, but you hope as he matures and ages in the league, he'll become a smarter player, and maybe with the addition of their new free agent, Fred VanVleet, he can help mentor Jalen Green and just a lot of these young guys in general. But along with VanVleet was another free agent who many might not like the signing of, and that is none other than Dillon Brooks. And if we're talking basketball alone for just a second, Dillon Brooks isn't a terrible basketball player. He's actually not a bad piece if you want a guy who can space the floor right, play solid, hard, fiery defense. Although this might not make much sense to some Rockets fans, as Dillon Brooks might act the exact opposite as Fred VanVleet, which could maybe hurt the young players like Green and Sengun, Amen Thompson, and Cam Whitmore. But maybe VanVleet can teach Dillon Brooks a thing or two as well, and maybe the Grizzlies situation humbled Brooks to a level. But if we go back to these young guys, I want to talk about Sengun. Last season, he averaged 15 points with 9 boards and 4 assists. To me, I actually really enjoy watching this guy play. He gets down low and plays the post, and he's not afraid to back down players aggressively. He has very solid footwork and good touch, as it's shown not only in the post, but his passing as well. We have another big man in the league who is showing great court vision and passes the ball very well. Now, is this guy Nikola Jokic? No, he's not. That's pretty clear. But I want you guys to understand that at 20 years old, this guy ranked 3rd in the NBA in assists per game by a center, with only Embiid, the reigning MVP, and Nikola Jokic ahead of him. He's already showing great upside, and with adding more offensive talent to the Rockets, you'll see his assist numbers go up even more. Which brings me to the draft picks of Whitmore and Thompson. Now, Amen Thompson, the number 4 pick, looks like and is an elite athletic player who could be close to it like a triple-double machine in the league. In the OTE, he averaged 16.4 points per game, along with just under 6 assists and 6 boards. And in the playoffs of the OTE, he brought the heat. He averaged 17, 9 assists, and 7 boards. And with the Summer League over, we got to see him in NBA action for a game. And in his lone game, he scored 16 points with 4 boards and 5 assists. His athleticism and guard-like skills as a wing player at 6'7" is fun and exciting to watch, and should be a great experience for Rockets fans. Unfortunately, we only got to see one game of Amen Thompson, In his game against Portland in the final minute, he suffered a sprained ankle, so a sigh of relief from Rockets fans as it's not an extreme injury that's not going to harm him too much. But let's get into the Rockets MVP. Okay, the summer MVP. But that's still something, isn't it? It's hard to believe this guy dropped to the 20th pick. There were some concerns about him in the draft, and the reason he fell was due to poor workouts and some not great interviews. But the Rockets, not having much to lose as they already drafted what seems to be a potential stud in Amen Thompson, decided to take the chance on Cam Whitmore. But was this a mistake by the teams that drafted in front of him? I mean, this guy was projected to be a top 10 pick and even top 5 in some mock drafts, and he plummeted to the 20 spot. I wouldn't have doubted if even the Rockets themselves originally thought of taking Cam Whitmore with their original 4 pick. He was the MVP of this year's Summer League, averaging 19, 5, and 2. He was also one of the few players to play all 6 games of Summer League. This guy seems to play both sides of the ball as well, and we caught a glimpse of this in the Warriors game where he had 8, let me repeat that, he had 8 total steals with 26 points on top of that. He averaged 2.5 steals during the Summer League, and he's definitely something to look forward to. Definitely probably the steal of the draft, although Imani Bates might be up there with a steal of the draft as well. But Cam Whitmore, disrespected and dropped all the way down to the 20. I think it's something to look forward to for the Rockets. Now, with all this said, you may think there's a lot of upside to this team, and there is, but this team is still young. There will be a lot of work for this team before they become a legitimate threat in the NBA. But all this young talent will be fun to watch, and the highlights, and you're going to have a lot of losses. But you hope that the highlights will make up for it for now. You're going to have a pretty good rebuild, Rockets fans, and I wouldn't doubt if they do slightly better than they did last year. But the West is a powerhouse, and even if they scratch out an extra 3 to 4 to 5 wins, I don't see them gaining much more ground than being the 14th spot. So for this year, we're going to have them at the bottom of the Western Conference sitting in the 15th spot.
Landing just ahead of the Rockets in the 14th spot, we have the Portland Trail Blazers. At this stage in the offseason, I'm sure Blazers fans are content or at least understanding with this spot, but Rocket fans are probably a bit confused. So let's get right into the discussion. Now, to immediately get the Rockets discourse out of the way, it was a very tough decision to rank these two teams as they both kind of suck. But here at a fan's eye view, we don't think the Rockets' young core is totally ready to make a significant jump. And with the Lillard saga coming to its climax, I predict the Blazers will inherit a few nice pieces that will assist them in getting a few more wins this year. Now, it's hard to base this all off hypotheticals, so let's leave the Rockets and any potential trade talk behind and just discuss the current Blazers roster. I know I just got done saying we wouldn't discuss hypothetical trades, so I won't, but we do have to talk about Damian Lillard. In 58 games last season, he managed to put up an impressive but expected 32 points per game and 7 assists. So if he happens to end up staying, which is not completely out of the question, then he will greatly improve this team, who only put up a record of 6-18 when he didn't play last season. But do not get it twisted. This team still has a ton of guard talent and depth behind him on the roster. First, we can start with the unknown variable, Scoot Henderson. In most drafts, this guy would have gone first in a heartbeat, but he was in the same draft as some guy named Victor Wembanyama. Scoot was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school and was one of the best players, and he decided to play in the G League instead of going to college, which was unique at the time. Still kind of is. It certainly didn't hurt his case, as he averaged 17 points per game, 5.1 rebounds, and almost 7 assists a game. And as previously mentioned, he was considered one of the top picks in the NBA draft. He ended up going 3rd overall to the Blazers, and he possesses NBA-ready athleticism and an NBA-ready body.
Pause!
He's explosive off the dribble and has unique shot-making abilities that he pairs nicely with his playmaking. However, I did call his shot-making unique because it lacks finesse or touch. As it stands, he almost solely relies on his athleticism to create his shot and struggles to hit from 3 consistently, as he only shot 27.5% from 3 in the G League. That will not fly in today's NBA. But despite that, I believe Scoot will put up good numbers and average around 18 points per game and be in contention for Rookie of the Year in a strong rookie class. However, Scoot isn't the only young bright spot on this roster, as they also have the trio of Anthony Simmons, Shaedon Sharpe, and Jermaine Grant. Sharpe is still a work in progress, as he only averaged 9.9 points per game, but it's important to remember he is only 19 years old, and he still managed to shoot 36% from 3. That's an impressive mark for a rookie to hit. Not to mention, in the last 10 games of the season, where Sharpe saw his most action, he managed to score an impressive 23.7 points per game, while cementing himself as a piece in this upcoming Blazers rebuild. Now, moving on to Anthony Simmons, the Blazers have a lot of love and expectations for him. They recently gave him a big contract, and so far he's met those expectations, as last season he put up 21 points per game and 4 assists out of the shooting guard position. He also shot almost 38% from 3, and he already pairs excellently with Dame, and that shouldn't change if Scoot ends up taking over the starting spot, as Scoot's a great dribble drive player, and Simmons is a great off-ball player who could easily shoot off those dribble drives. Last player we're going to talk about is Grant. And make no mistake, he's a very solid piece in this roster, and he averaged 20.5 points per game last season. He earned himself a nice little extension from the Blazers, and if Lillard doesn't play, he's probably the most proven player on this roster, as he is 29 years old and he's a seasoned NBA vet. That kind of presence will be vital for them on court, and he'll be an important member of the locker room for these young guys to learn from. Now, despite all these points I've just made, do not get it confused. This team is still very incomplete, and it looks like they're going to be bad for the foreseeable future. The players I mentioned will only keep them out of the cellar, and just barely at that, as like we mentioned, they slot in at 14 out of 15.
All right, so at our number 13 spot, we have the San Antonio Spurs. Now, if you're a Spurs fan and you're watching this and you don't like that we're putting them at the 13 spot, I need you to hear me out for a second. They were close to one of the bottom teams in the league this year because of the lack of depth and just being a young team in general and not having a true identity. So let's get into what everyone is raging about this year, and that's Victor Wembanyama. This guy is definitely going to be the identity of this team, and he's going to be the best player on this team for years to come. I think it's funny that no matter what, we just never know the true height of some basketball players in the league, and it's the same with Wemby. He's somewhere between 7'3 and 7'5, although the Spurs themselves announced that he's actually almost 7'4 to their official measurements. So the point is, this guy is tall. But how much does Wemby help the Spurs this next season? A lot. Maybe not much in the standings, but you've given the franchise another great big man. And we've seen the amount of great big men that have come out of San Antonio. And of course, he's going to be coached by none other than Greg Popovich. Wemby is going to be a star of this team next season, and it's going to be fun to go out and watch these guys play. Wemby will add just about everything you could want from a player. His ability to create shots for himself is like no other. At 7'5", this guy can dribble, he can drive, he can shoot, he can finish well, and it also seems that this guy's a monster in the paint on the other end. He can block shots like crazy. He averaged 3 blocks per game with the Metropolitans. Now, the rule set might be a bit different in the NBA than the LNB Pro A, but his length and height will make it difficult to get past him anyways. It's also kind of interesting that this team decided after 2 Summer League games to shut this guy down from playing. He did not play well the first game at all. He even said himself he really had no idea what he was doing. He felt like he was just running around on the court. But the second game went much more expected to the fans' expectations of this guy. He played outstanding in that game. So I'm sure everyone wanted to see Wemby play a bit more in the Summer League, but I guess maybe the Spurs have seen everything they need to. Now, I don't want to spend too much time on Wemby, as there are other players on this team, and everyone has been talking about Wemby for long enough. So let's talk about the other young guys on this team. Keldon Johnson was probably the best player on the team last year, averaging 22 points per game. There were some high and low marks for Keldon Johnson, but these are just things that happen with young players and just athletes in general. They can be hot for a while and then just plummet and be cold. It all averages out, and when you watch him, he seems like he'll be a real good player in the future. The solid 2 option in the Spurs, with Wemby being the 1 more than likely, and this surrounding cast doesn't seem all that bad for this young team. Trey Jones, like his brother Tyus, is another high IQ, smart basketball player who play the point guard position much more traditionally. Trey is a solid facilitator and a passer as well, as he averaged almost 13 points and a little bit under 7 assists with just a turnover and a half per game. With the addition of Wemby, you can see Trey's assist numbers only going up even more. Along with this young team, Jeremy Sohan and Devin Vassell are also some players to keep an eye on. Before Vassell's injury, he was having quite the outbreak season, averaging 18.5 points, shooting 43% from the field and just under 40% from 3 in 38 games. Hopefully in the next season, his knee won't be a problem and he'll be able to play most of the season, because if he does, the Spurs have solid scoring options from the 2 to the 3 and now on the 5 as well. And Sohan seems to be a great defender for the Spurs, and even though his scoring improved tremendously through the year, it doesn't look like that if he doesn't score, that it will hurt the team too much. We've all seen the Dennis Rodman memes with Sohan, the colored hair, and one-handed free throws, but in reality, this guy could play the perfect role this team would be looking for if the scoring is going to be taken care of. So, if it seems like the Spurs have all these positives on their team, why do we rank them so low? One thing to remember is that last season, the Spurs shared a similar record to the Rockets. And when we looked at this list of teams, we had to think about how much of a difference would Wemby really make on the team. And it's going to be a big difference for sure. He's going to give them a lot of extra talent, a lot more offense, and the defense that they really need. He's going to be the anchor. But can Wemby give this team an extra 10 to even 15 more wins that would have put them in the 12 to 13 spot last year? Probably not. Okay, Wemby's good. He's really, really good. But like a lot of these teams down here, they're also young and they have quite a bit more time to prove that they're going to be a legitimate threat in the NBA. So for now, we have to rank the Spurs at the 13th spot.
The Utah Jazz were a very hard team to rank for the upcoming season. This team was so good just 2 to 3 years ago. But now this is definitely a team that's building itself up for the future, as they have accumulated 15 first-round picks, and they have a young core of Lauri Markkanen, Walker Kessler, and Colin Sexton. So despite all this, let's discuss why we have them in the 12th spot. Now, this is sort of a lame excuse, but ultimately the West is just too strong. The Jazz didn't fall any lower than they were last year in the rankings, but we don't predict them climbing at all either. I think this Jazz team does have pieces, but ultimately they just don't have the ability to get over the hump. But with all those picks they have, they'll be set up for the future if they use them correctly. But we aren't talking about the Jazz of the future, we're talking about the Jazz of today. Obviously, the Jazz are led by Lauri Markkanen, who has bounced around a few times in his young career, but is still quite talented. This last season, he put up 26 points per game and 8 rebounds a game, while also shooting a near 40% from 3 as a big man. He is the current prototypical NBA big man that has the ability to stretch the floor beautifully, but he also has some great finishing skills with some sneaky athleticism. However, his defense isn't anything special, and weirdly enough for a historically defensive Jazz unit, this will be a common theme for the current Jazz players. Also, this next season will be make or break in a weird way for Markkanen, in my opinion. Either he will solidify himself as someone the Jazz can keep around and be a dominant leader of this rebuild and the future team, or he may become trade bait to nab even more picks. The Jazz also have Jordan Clarkson, who has time and time again showed he is an absolute flamethrower, as he can drop 50 points on any given night. But he also is very subpar on defense, which does not bode well for a potentially defensive lackluster unit in the Jazz. But he's not really relied on for his defense, and he does give them the offense they expect, as he averaged 20 points per game last year, while adding 4 assists from the 2-guard spot. Now, one of the more interesting or promising players on the Jazz is young Walker Kessler. Kessler was one of the pieces the Jazz got when moving on from All-Star Rudy Gobert. Kessler was in competition for Rookie of the Year. He averaged a solid 9 points per game and 8 rebounds, but where he really made his presence felt was on the defensive end, as he averaged 2.3 blocks per game, which ranked him 4th in the entire NBA, and he had 33 more blocks than the person in the 5th spot. His defensive prowess makes him a great frontcourt pairing with Markkanen, but his offensive game needs a lot of work if he really wants to make this next step in his game. The Jazz have a unique advantage, if you can call it that, over the bottom half of the barrel teams. That is, they are probably the least top-heavy in the best way possible. Obviously, Markkanen is an elite, potentially star player, but the Jazz don't have a lot of star power outside of him. They do, however, have a ton of quality veteran players. These range from the questionable but potentially good Colin Sexton, that remains to be seen to some extent. They have Kelly Olynyk, a sharpshooting stretch big who has been in big games and on big teams before. And they also have Chris Dunn, who comes from my Timberwolves and is a solid bench point guard. But as we previously alluded to, these pieces just aren't good enough to get them into the playoffs. All these pieces definitely separate them from the weaker teams underneath them in the West, which is why we have them ranked 12th. But without another star, this team just isn't quite ready to make the jump into the Western playoff picture.
Okay, so the Pelicans are ranking at the 11th spot on our list. But this is such a hard team to rank solely because of Zion. Now, let's forget about all the things happening with Mariah Mills and let's just focus on basketball. It's so hard to rank this team when Zion can't stay healthy. It's realistically hard to go on about this team because, to be honest, the surrounding players with him aren't bad players, and I think they fill their roles quite nicely. But this team is driven by Zion, and if he can't stay on the court this year and be whatever Zion ready means, I don't know if this team even makes the play-in, as they barely did without him. Ingram is a great player, don't get me wrong. He averaged 25, 5.5, and 6 rebounds this season. Along with McCollum, he averaged 21 and 6. And both these guys were just shooting under the 40% threshold from 3. There may be other teams with better pieces than those two, but these guys are producing what's necessary for Zion to succeed with this team, but they just can't succeed without him. If Zion is healthy and can play most of the season, this team could easily make it into the top 5 teams in the Western Conference. I mean, when this guy wants to win a game, he is a straight bully and can take anyone he wants down low into the post or even beat you on the drive and finish hard at the rim. But we have to be real with ourselves, and we have to look at the past for now. Zion cannot stay healthy, and even if it seems like he should be able to play, he's not. I don't, for the life of me, understand what Zion ready means. But Zion better get back on the court, because if he doesn't, the Pelicans are not going to have a good season. It has been so disappointing as an NBA fan to not watch this guy play and continue to be sidelined for most of his seasons. If the Pelicans don't figure out the situation with him, they're not going to be looking at a good season this year, and we don't really believe they'll make playoffs if their star player doesn't return to the court. The idea of Zion is better than Zion. And it has been getting so bad that there have been trade rumors with him. It's possible we could have seen Zion traded during the draft. But what other team is going to take the chance with him and his track record? It almost seems like Zion hasn't made a move to become a professional athlete. A lot of his problems are centered around his own physique. This guy takes fall damage every time he drops from the rim off a layup or a dunk. Look, the Pelicans are in a sticky situation with this guy, and it's hard to defend him when he hasn't even played half of his possible games since coming into the league. You have to wonder, how is this even worth it? As far as what the Pelicans need to do, it's a tough call. To me, if you can't keep yourself on the court, what good really are you? This guy could maybe dominate anyone in the league if he's playing you, but playing an average 38 games a year on a rookie max contract just doesn't speak worth to me at all. Now, this whole talk has been Zion, but what else is there to talk about? When he's healthy, he makes his team a top contender in the West, but when he's not, this team is scratching away at a play-in spot. If you're a Pelicans fan or have an opinion you feel strongly about with this situation, leave a comment about what you think the best idea for the Pelicans is moving forward with him. I'd love to know what you guys think about this situation. So, because we have to take the injuries into account and Zion's willingness to keep himself ready to be on the court, we just don't see this team without him making the playoffs, which is why they land at the 11th spot in our list.
All right, guys, and that'll do it for our ranking of the bottom 5 teams in the Western Conference. Just a quick overview: we went Rockets at the bottom, then the Trailblazers, then the Spurs, then the Jazz, and the Pelicans to round it out. And we think those are the 5 teams that will not make the play-in or the playoffs. If you agree or disagree or have something else you want to say, feel free to comment it down below. And thank you so much for getting to this part of the video. Feel free to hit that thumbs up and subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. And we'll see you in the next episode.
I'm gonna go get it. Fuck what they say, I got no limits. I'm walking in with a bottle of water, but that little bitch got Patron in it.